I find the Genesis Vision GT to be a bit of a mixed bag for me, and it's definitely a vehicle which, if you haven't driven it yet, I would strongly suggest you give a little bit of time before you fully decide whether you like it or not. Because on the one hand, I think there are certain things about the car which could come off as kind of downsides or oversights or just reasons not to use it. But if you think about it a bit more, I think the reason why I personally even found them to be kind of off-putting is actually because this car is a little bit more realistic compared to some other Vision GTs. Now, on the one hand, it's a roughly 900 horsepower per tonne monster with the kind of shape of something like the Mercedes Vision GT. It's a full-on supercar in terms of its appearance. Horsepower-wise, you're looking up around 870. It barely weighs 1 metric tonne, 30 kilos lighter than the Suzuki Jimny even, also of course in this update, and the point level, as you would assume, is pretty damn high. It's just under 800 even on sports tyres, which is what it comes with as standard. Now, I slapped on some racing hards to see what kind of a difference it would make, and obviously that pushes it over 800, but not quite as much as you might expect. It's not a ridiculously high car. So what am I talking about when it comes to downsides? Well, for me, the number one downside, as I alluded to, I believe, in my review for 1.42 as a whole a few days ago, is actually the brakes. Now, the brakes feel completely inadequate, in my opinion, compared to the rest of the car. And I think part of the reason why, in fact, there are two primary reasons in my book. Part of the reason why is because you accelerate so quickly that you don't really realise just how much speed you've built up by the time it comes to slowing down for a corner. So by the time you do slam on the anchors, I personally found that I was either braking a little bit too early to try and avoid going off the track, and then, of course, wasting some time, or braking way too late, going straight off the track, and, of course, that's not ideal either. The reason why I think that happens, though, not in terms of the braking, but in terms of why I found it annoying, is actually kind of a good thing. It's not good in terms of using it because it could be annoying, but it's good because I actually think that's a lot more realistic than some of the other Vision GTs. Some of the other ones are so completely forgiving that they feel ridiculous. And as fun as it can be to fly around the track in a Tomahawk at 400 miles an hour, of course that's not necessarily too realistic compared to real life. And it's such a forgiving experience that it kind of completely negates the whole real driving simulator aspect of Gran Turismo and basically just makes it like a Hot Wheels toy. On the other hand, if you have a car like this, where the brakes require more forethought, the handling, which can easily break the tail loose, requires a bit more control and a bit more respect for the throttle, instead of just flooring it everywhere as you can in many Vision GTs, it actually gives it a distinctly more realistic slant. And to me, that's why I said that it's a mixed bag, because initially it could seem to be an annoying car, or an exasperating one, or one that's not necessarily even worth the effort. On the other hand, I actually think it is, because I find it more realistic, it demands more respect to get the best out of it, and yet the result is not just any other Vision GT, this is not just a marketing exercise, it actually does feel like the folks at Genesis put real effort into it, not just making it, of course, an exercise in branding, but also an exercise in fun. Because say what you will about Realism, this thing is tremendously quick, it's tremendously fun, and it certainly looks the part. This is the kind of beauty and the kind of creativity which I want to see from the Vision GT program, especially from a brand like Genesis, where you wouldn't necessarily expect something like this. If a few years ago you were to say to someone, do you think a Genesis concept car could be more attractive than a no-holds-barred, no-rules BMW sports concept car, I don't think many people would say yes, and yet look at where we are. Although the BMW Vision GT does have its fans, and I'm just using it as one example of a few, it's not exactly the most imaginative thing out there. It was more like an early access look at the BMW 1M. This, on the other hand, feels like something which will probably never happen on the road, but you also kind of wish that it would, because it's such a cool car. The fact that it also has the fully detailed interior is also a nice touch. The fact that the rear view camera stretches all the way across the dash not only is a pretty cool gimmick, but I also love the fact that it gives you fantastic visibility out of the rear of the car, and I would imagine, although I don't drive with VR personally, it would probably look pretty damn nice in VR as well. Ultimately, of course, as a 1 million credit car, or of course you can get it on the ticket with the early access thing, either way, I would say that if you are looking to perhaps spend some cash on a Vision GT that you could definitely use for some events, the 800 point level, Vision GT, exclusive races, maybe even some online stuff, the fact that you can also add ballast to it and reduce the horsepower, and of course the different tyres make a massive difference as well, it actually does have a bit more use than some of the Vision GTs usually would. It also feels like the kind of car that if you were to master it, could probably be quite fun for drifting as well. So my thoughts on this one are it's a car which could easily put off some people. For me, I initially loved it, then when I kind of noticed how bad the brakes seem, it kind of put me off, how tail happy it was, even on racing tyres. It kind of gave me a bit of a mixed feeling, but then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, that's actually kind of an endearing quality. That extra layer of realism and respect which the car demands, I think kind of suits it, because at the end of the day, it manages to give the car more of a kind of modern day Cobra sort of vibe. Yes, it's a futuristic, forward-thinking hypercar, but it also has some distinctly old-fashioned vibes in terms of the way you have to drive it, and that's a pretty cool combination. So overall, that's it for my thoughts on the Genesis Berlinetta Vision GT, one of the longer names in the category, and of course I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Ultimately, that's it for the two cars that we can talk about for the moment in 1.42, and of course when we finally get the Bulgari, which incidentally I actually noticed that the Bulgari already has a livery section in the livery search of GT7, and not a single person has done a livery for it, because I feel like people wouldn't even want to admit that they've got the watch. But regardless, we will talk about that car eventually, and of course that will be at this point in February. So I'll see you then for that one. Stick around for more GT7 content, and for now, thanks for watching.